welcome friends to a new video blog where I promise to play with a straight bat. And I'm going to start by allowing my creative juices to flow in these lockdown times by adapting a poem by the great Rabindranath Tagore and adapting it to Corona times. So here goes. Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where a pandemic isn't an alibi for untrammeled state power, but instead redefines the state's citizenship engagement by putting the citizen first, where rules are enforced not by fear or diktat, but by information and knowledge, where prime ministers and chief ministers work together as a collective and not as adversaries, where autocratic tendencies are replaced by democratic consensus, where domain expertise is valued more than routine cheerleaders, where a national lockdown, even if deemed necessary, is planned through greater consultation and not implemented at 4 hours' notice, where when just days before the lockdown announcement, a few MPs wear masks and call for Parliament to be adjourned, the presiding officer doesn't treat them with contempt and asks them to remove their masks, where toppling an opposition state government doesn't get precedence over a health emergency, where crucial decisions are taken through a national task force comprising the best and brightest minds in the land and not just a small group of Delhi-centric bureaucrats, where the health infrastructure of the country is built over decades and doesn't become a jugaad solution to combat an immediate crisis, where investments in public health take precedence over investing in personal advertisement, where government hospitals are rebuilt instead of restoring parliament buildings, where quality health centers are given preference over gargantuan statues and boulevards, where pitch battles are not fought over places of worship, but over whether a disputed land should be given for a school or a hospital, where the human development index of a state matters more than the foreign direct investment numbers, where the wealth of a state is judged by the quality of its human capital and not just by how many MOUs are signed at business summits, where doctors aren't just acclaimed as corona warriors in a pandemic, but are respected through good times and bad, where respect isn't just about lighting diyas, thali processions and glitzy air shows, but is actually about giving our health workers better working conditions and quality protective equipment, where junior doctors don't have to agitate for higher stipends and seek legal and police protection when they are attacked simply for doing their job, where doctors and scientists are awarded and rewarded more than film stars and fashion icons, where those who suffer economic and physical dislocation aren't treated as invisibilized migrant labor, but given their due as equal citizens with equal rights, where those who built our homes and cities, our bridges and highways are not one of them, but are truly one of us, deserving social and financial security, where those NGOs who raise their voice in solidarity with the poor and homeless are not dismissed by the country's top law officer as prophets of doom, but are appreciated for being society's conscience keepers, where journalists who report on the travails of displaced labor aren't labeled as vultures, but hailed for showing truth to power, where providing basic transport services for laborers to go back to their villages doesn't become a center versus state tug of war or pit state versus state, but instead offers an opportunity to melt our interstate borders, where a UP-bound train doesn't end up in a Raulkela and a railway track isn't bloodied with the crushed bodies of fatigued fellow citizens, where a teenage girl cycling 1,200 kilometers to take her injured father home isn't celebrated as a potential Olympic medal winner, but is a grim and enduring reminder of the desperate poverty that breeds grit and determination, where we stop using catchy buzzwords like Vande Bharat for evacuation of Indians by air when we can't provide better options to those stuck on the ground. Where social distancing is not just an elite privilege, but an option available to all citizens. Where 50 people do not have to share a single toilet and a dozen people sleep in a single room. Even as single families can live in multi-storied skyscraper splendor. Where the stark inequities are reduced by a welfare state that places a premium on providing low-cost housing for all with basic sanitation facilities. Where Dharavi is not seen as Asia's largest slum, but as a reflection of the degradation of urban life that forces millions to live in squalor. Where an online education isn't just practiced in a few urban schools, but where bridging the digital divide makes technology accessible to all. Where members of a specific community aren't ostracized and spurious links drawn between religion and virus only to further narrow political agendas. Where vegetable vendors aren't boycotted only because of their religious identity. Where the media doesn't seek to sensationalize the news in the race for television rating points with provocative hashtags that only spread disaffection and enmity among communities. Where news is seen as a public service and not as yet another commodity to be merchandised. Where a pandemic breaks through all caste and class barriers. Where a cooperative society or resident welfare association doesn't become a private fiefdom run by individual farman. Where domestic help aren't stigmatized as corona carriers or denied their wages because they are barred from the forbidding gates of a housing complex. Where the realization dawns that this was not a virus spawned in the slums but imported by the flying class of the country. Where we remember that the affluent can Netflix and Zoom their way through a lockdown, but the poor still need to work for a daily income. Where the lucky few can work from home, but the multitude still need public transport to go to work. Where corporates can donate generously to the Prime Minister's Care Fund, but don't forget to care for those around them. Where all government relief funds are subject to greater public scrutiny and transparency. Where job cuts are an exception, not the rule, and compassion overrides commerce. Where governments provide mega stimulus packages that above all else ensure direct cash support to the most vulnerable. Where we see reform opportunity in a crisis, but don't allow the reformers' zeal to descend into cronyism once again. Where reforms are designed to protect the interests of labor and not just a well-networked industry. Where we look to build a self-reliant India, not as an attractive slogan, but as a living reality. Where our lawmakers first abandon the foreign accessories, the branded watches, designer glasses, luxury cars that are such an intrinsic part of their lifestyle. My friends, into that heaven of freedom, let my country awake.